Welcome back, everyone, to the Soccer Talk Lads podcast. We are glad that you are here. It is Wednesday, April 12th, the middle of whatever time of month this is. It's beautiful weather here today in North Florida, the kind of weather that makes you think, I guess this is why people move to Florida. How's the weather over there in Kansas City, Justin?
Steven, I am in St. Louis, actually.
Oh, excuse me. Forgive me.
But I think it's the same in KC as it is in St. Louis. It's beautiful. I was at the
Very
national
nice.
team game, and it was the first time that I've been at that stadium that I haven't been freezing my ass off. So it was
Well, that's
nice.
nice.
Yeah.
That's a big plus. Let's talk about the U.S. women's national team because a lot has gone on in the past week as they've had their final round of action before the World Cup,
Yeah.
I believe, in a few months, and some devastating news for the team in the form of Mallory Swanson going down to the patellar tendon injury. Mallory Swanson, no relation to Ron Swanson, of course,
She
much to the chagrin.
might have married into the family. I'm not sure how
Maybe,
that
yeah. I
works.
mean, she is a person of color, and he's painfully white, but also he's fictional, and she's not.
Right.
So, I think that second one is probably the bigger determining
I don't know.
factor
We'll,
on them
we'll look
not
into
being
it.
related. But in any case, huge loss for the team. Obviously, hugely disappointing for her personally because, um, she has been a budding superstar for this team
Yeah.
and is a huge part of the team. Why don't you talk about that and what her loss means for a little bit
Yeah, it means a
before we talk
lot.
about some of the positive news?
Yeah, before we get into positives, before we get into City, yeah, it means a lot. Like, so in the post match press conference, I forget who asked the question, but somebody asked Flacco about like exactly what her injury meant, if it'd be like a like for like substitution because Alyssa Thompson comes in. Alyssa Thompson is kind of a similar type of player. She's a little bit quicker, obviously very inexperienced. She's only played two professional games as an 18-year-old, but like could maybe take on some of that burden. But Mal Swanson, like I thought, probably should have been the MVP of the NWSL last year, and like you lose that player, that's big. And Flacco talked about how they designed this formation to essentially be Swanson and Sophia Smith on opposite wings with a striker in the middle. And so if you lose Swanson, you lose like a big part of the entire offense that you've drawn up. And yeah, it's especially at this point where this is the last game before the roster decision is made. Like it's a big loss.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's unfortunate and disappointing, obviously, especially entering a World Cup where maybe for one of the first times that I can remember, the U.S. women weren't necessarily the odds-on favorite to win.
Yeah,
They're still obviously one of the top quality teams, and still obviously could be world champions by
but
the end of
like
it.
definitely a like obviously the world is getting more competitive, which is awesome because that makes the World
Yeah.
Cup more fun. But also in a situation that they haven't necessarily like they win, and you I don't know. I have a hard time when teams are winning to like really talk down on them, but when you look at it from a process standpoint, like they haven't necessarily looked like what we expect a U.S. team to look in
Hmm.
terms of just like running, like enforcing their style of play on other teams.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. And she was a big part of making that possible.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll be able to find a replacement. The good news is, before we get to the good news, I just want to mention that I forgot my microphone today, so the audio quality. Or I didn't forget. I forgot a dongle. And it's a whole
Ah,
story, but I
that
needed
damn
a thing,
dongle.
the dongle, and I don't have my audio quality, and then Justin's having a little bit of feedback with his cord because he's in St. Louis. So if you hear some weird audio, we apologize. We'll get it worked out for the
We're
next
getting better,
episode.
guys.
But
We're
yeah, we're
getting
we're
better.
trying. Trying our hardest. But the good news about the U.S. women's national team this week is that Julie Ertz is back after a long hiatus herself. Um, and she is really going to, hopefully, if she can stay healthy and shake off any rust that she had from being away for a long time, she is hopefully going to be a engine for this team and
Hmm.
really a dominating midfielder for the U.S. and kind of one of the best um, controlling the game midfielders in the women's game in the world, and a huge presence. Did want to talk about what you saw with her in these two games?
Yeah, because it's like it's comical how much of a difference she makes like the second that she stepped back onto the field because
Mm-hmm.
like it kind of forced them into a different formation. So to kind of get a little bit granular, when like the past 2 years have been like trying to find a replacement for Ertz essentially, and they've kind of settled on a double pivot with Haran and Andy Sullivan, with Roosevelt or Ashley Sanchez as the attacking midfielder, and it's kind of made Lindsey Haran like ineffective in a way. But like as soon as Julia Ertz comes in for Andy Sullivan, it pushes Haran up into the midfield more, and like you see an immediate impact with how much ease they kind of have getting the ball forward and their energy. And like a lot of that is because Julia Ertz is just such a ball stopper. Like she's has a lot of confidence, obviously, but I think players feel more comfortable with her there, knowing that like if something does come the other way, that she's going to be able to like snuff it out. She's just that that kind of central midfielder, right? So like yeah, it was incredibly noticeable, and she like is only going to get better as she kind of comes back into playing more. And ideally, she'll have an NWSL team by next week. It sounds like it's pretty imminent, or at least that's what they were telling us, which would be good because she's always already looked like she's kind of, obviously there was some sloppiness with some of her passes and things, but like there's no way to not feel encouraged by it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And what were your overall takeaways from the game that you got to witness in person at the lovely City Park?
Lovely City Park. Everyone was very complimentary of City Park, Stephen. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Well, they have to be. Those are the rules.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ireland kind of play in the way that US have trouble with, and that they're very compact, they're well organized. It's similar with like how US had trouble against Japan in the past, that like in their current makeup, they just can't break down a low block for some reason. Their one goal comes when Alana Cook sends in I'm going to call it a cross. Some would say it's a shot, but she kind of sends it to the back post for Lindsey Horan, and the goalkeeper plays it and it goes in. It's a great goal.
Yeah, it was. I am trying to learn a lot about the women's game. Obviously, an area that I have been behind in, and I don't like that. What are you most looking forward to about this World Cup that's coming up in a few months?
Yeah, I think like competitiveness, Stephen. Like it seems like there are 4 or 5 teams that don't have a lot of separation. Like Germany, France, England, Australia, US are probably all equally as likely to win this. Like Australia, especially being at home, they beat England 2-0 yesterday off of Sam Kerr just being Sam Kerr. And like teams, I think the US still have a leg up in terms of their depth. Like the rest of the world, especially like if you watch England, they're missing their starting center backs, and that was an issue for them. So like the US are spoiled for choice in a lot of positions outside the 6, which they definitely aren't, but they have like 3 world-class goalkeepers. They have a lot of wingers that could step in and be incredible. They're really good midfielders. Like the US should still feel confident, but the world is catching up, and like it's great to see from a competitive standpoint, but I still get worried when you watch these games and you're like, looks like they're having trouble scoring goals, or at least like being fluid in their attack. And they still got 2 shutouts, so you can't be 2 clean sheets, so you can't be too mad. But
yeah, don't pretend this is some other sport where you can just say shutout. Yeah, so that's exciting, and I think it's great to see the City Park start to host these international soccer events. We heard the news also this week that City Park will be one of the many host cities for the Gold Cup, along with Toronto floating out in the ether.
That's what's great about that graphic for anyone that hasn't seen it. It's like it's the US, but then Toronto is just like Canada's an outline, but Toronto is
floating in the middle of Lake Ontario. Yeah. So in any case, I think that's really cool for the game, really exciting for St. Louis, and I think that atmosphere is going to be, I think we're going. I don't want to do the best fans in baseball thing, but I do think we're going to be one of the better soccer atmospheres in the country. And I think maybe even more so for non-MLS events because we're just such a soccer crazy city. Like the drop off from supporting any team to supporting our local team might be less for us than for a lot of other cities. So I'm very excited to
Yeah.
see that happen and see more games at City Park. And I hope to attend one myself before terribly long.
Cool.
But
Yeah, I'm excited to see
have to wait for that.
international games are always so fun, and like I think they do struggle attendance wise sometimes. So like it's nice. Like they almost like it wasn't a sellout, but it was 22,300, so like just 200 people shy of a sellout last night. So it was nice seeing that for the U.S.
Definitely. What are your thoughts right now on Vlatko as manager of the U.S. Women's National Team?
I I struggle with Flacco because I think he's a great man manager. Like I think he's the right person for this era of the U.S. Women's National Team, and that like with everything going on off the field, I think that the players trust him, and obviously they're comfortable with him, and he's a guy who will give them space and give them their moments when they need it. Like you saw with Becky, they weren't going to play Becky just because last night was kind of the final tryout for a lot of players, but because they were in St. Louis, they gave her 30 minutes to kind of like have that moment, which I thought was really cool. And you see moments like that, you're like, okay, it's a good, like he has such a good knack for knowing when to like celebrate certain players, and players feel comfortable, players talk to him. I have issues with some of the things that he does tactically, like this formation that we've kind of been married to, like I said earlier, where like Horan and Andy Sullivan are playing so deep in the midfield, and like it doesn't seem like it ever works out the way that it's supposed to, and we just like keep going back to it. I don't know. Like I have issues with that, but like Vlatko as a coach, like I think there are better coaches in the world, but I think he's the right coach for this team right now, if that makes sense.
I think that makes sense. Yeah. You're saying he's terrible.
No, no. Like he seems like such a good guy too. Like I, it's like you feel bad saying like being overly negative in like a personal way. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally get it. Do you have more faith in Vlatko or in the chalk outline of a mystery person that is the U.S. men's national team head coach?
Oh, that's tough. I would say Vlatko, because Anthony Hudson will just end up being like the head coach or something. They'll do something stupid like that.
Can you imagine if we went in?
All this just like make
I
him
don't
the
even
permanent
really have
manager.
anything against Anthony Hudson, but can you imagine if we went into the most important
Right.
cycle of our entire team's history with Anthony Hudson?
It would not be
Yes.
a good fallout. Yeah, because like Anthony Hudson too, he's another guy that I think is a very good assistant coach. Like it seems like the players get along well with him, and he does good with the dual internationals and getting people to come into camp and like talking to players. But like tactically, man, that guy is like you can't have a guy be your manager that fell out with the Colorado Rapids so bad that they fired him like unceremoniously. I don't know.
Yeah, if you're not good enough for the Colorado Rapids, I'm a little concerned about your coaching prospects.
Yeah, and I think he deserves another chance. But like, yeah, do not make this man the actual national team coach, please.
Let's talk, and we will get to St. Louis City in a minute, folks. I know you're clamoring for our Klaus updates, but let's talk about the U.S. men's vacancy for a minute because we are still pretty largely in the dark about what's going on there. However, there was a tangential story this week that was pretty interesting for those following it, which was the apparent agreement and then very sudden disagreement of Jesse Marsh with Leicester City, correct? To be their next manager. Leicester, of course, in the relegation zone right now, as are every team that isn't Manchester City and Arsenal.
Also, every team interested in Jesse Marsh is
every team interested in Jesse Marsh. I definitely think you have to consider Jesse Marsh as a candidate for the U.S. men's national team job, if for no other reason than that he is the most prominent American soccer coach probably ever. So that's an interesting fact that he seems to be taking his time and not jumping at the first offer that comes to him. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on about whether he would be a good fit for this roster and whether he'd be the right choice for the job.
I think he'd be a good fit. Like I like Jesse Marsh. My issue is that like I would like to see them get away from the era of players that the era of managers, the era of players that were around Great Berhalter's era, which Jesse Marsh is very much in that circle as well. Like I feel like U.S. soccer would be well off if they got away from like that group, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. Like I think I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but there's a bit of a falling out with Claudio Reyna of sorts, and I would very much like Gio Reyna to be a part of this team. And I feel like if there was say a foreign manager who had a little bit more of like a gravitas to him, that like someone like Gio wouldn't be able to, or someone like Claudio Reyna wouldn't be able to call him up and dictate terms, so to speak. Like Claudio Reyna and Daniel Reyna aren't doing that to Jose Mourinho,
Yeah.
like.
I was gonna say. So you're saying Carlo Ancelotti is the next guy?
Carlo is, yeah, I feel like Carlo's going to coach Brazil. Man, that'd be
Probably.
amazing if they could pull that off. But
Um,
like from a tactical standpoint, I think Jesse Marsh would be a good choice.
yeah, I think I don't mind if they hire him if they think he's the right guy for the job. I don't want it to be a situation where it's like, well, he's American, so it's his job. Like
Yeah.
that's where my concern would be really. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting. I wish we had a little more news. Um,
The thing that's concerning is that like we still don't have like a sporting director or a
Yeah.
GM too, and I feel like those will get filled first before they appoint the head manager.
Yeah, I think it'll be. I don't know. I think things should pick up when the club season dies down a bit, but hopefully we will see answers pretty soon because there is a Gold Cup this summer. There's
Hmm.
important competitions, and
There's a made-up cup competition next week, actually. The Mexico game that we're playing that I have no idea what this tournament is that just popped up.
hey, I'm sure it's very important. As
I'm
are
sure
all CONCACAF.
it's all above board. I'm sure we can all agree on
Yeah,
that.
I agree. Definitely, definitely agree with that. All right, let's move on to the topic we put off long enough.
We've been skirting around it.
Yeah, which is the St. Louis SC game in Seattle this weekend, a 3-0 loss with goals from Josh Alencio, Raul Ruidiaz, and an own goal from Jake Norinsky in the 89th minute. This was a game that I don't think we or almost anyone else expected us to win.
Right.
So, in one sense, I'm not like devastated that we didn't win it. It sucks to have two losses in a row. It sucks to have two losses in a row with the Western or Eastern Division leading Cincinnati coming our way next week.
Supporter shield leading right now.
That's what I mean. Yeah. That's. But I'm not all that upset. I guess I'm sure there are people panicking, and I understand why. And it's very possible we'll be 5-3.
Yeah.
But I just felt like this wasn't that bad an effort for 65 minutes until we allowed the first goal, and then things fell apart pretty quickly thereafter. But I don't know. What were your takeaways? There were some very interesting comments from the team, especially Roman Bürki after the game, which we'll get to in a moment. But what were your takeaways? What's the vibe check for this one? How did you feel overall about this game?
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Steven. Like, it felt like everyone is very frustrated after the match, and I think that probably comes from two straight losses. And like, if you look at our schedule, this is absolutely the hardest stretch of this team will play all year, like until the end of the season, where you have 3 games against like actual winning opponents. So, and like a lot of teams have lost in Seattle. A lot of teams will lose again in Seattle this year. So, like, I wasn't necessarily upset about it. Like I said, we kind of talked about it last week that we tried to warn everyone, Steven, that this could be coming.
Yeah.
So like vibe wise, I don't know, frustrated but like accepting, if that is a vibe. For what it's worth, like the team seems like they understood that they played well for 60 minutes until the Intensio goal, and then like it kind of forced them to open up a bit more, which then like Seattle just tore right through for the rest of the game. So like it's a learning experience, I think, and like I don't think you can be too mad about losing on the road in Seattle as an expansion team. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this is just about recalibrating our
mm,
expectations partially after a 5 game winning streak to start the season. It was cool. It was amazing. I don't think that that's completely like out the window now.
yeah,
Obviously, the 15 points aren't out the window, but also I don't think just because we have this tough stretch of games, we're suddenly a bad team now or have to be in panic mode. Um, I think the team still looks pretty good. I don't think we've been embarrassed in either of these losses, even though we've been, shut out both times
mm,
and have ultimately lost. The Minnesota game definitely could have gone the other way. And even this Sounders game, if we'd had a lucky bounce or something, things could have changed. But after Cincinnati, we've got Colorado, who certainly is very beatable. We then host Union Omaha for the U.S. Open Cup, which the Al versus Al matchup,
mm.
of course,
Oh yeah,
very critical. You would hope we'd win that and give ourselves a shot in the arm there. Then we have State
Al
versus
supremacy
Portland.
on the line too.
That's right.
You gotta win
The only kind of supremacy, I want to be very clear on this, that the Soccer Talk Lads podcast supports. Okay,
Thank you,
that is
Steven.
the
Yeah, that
only kind of
we're getting into
supremacy.
dangerous territory there. So I'm glad
Yeah,
you bailed me out.
you're welcome. I just want to be very clear. But then you've got Portland, Dallas, Chicago, Sporting, Vancouver. A lot of pretty beatable teams there.
Mm,
And if you're looking at the end of that stretch and you're 9-4, 8-5, whatever, like you can't be too upset. Our next really huge test after Cincinnati will be at LAFC on May 31st, and that's another one that you're going to pencil in a loss, and
yeah,
that's
LAFC
fine.
are freaking buzzsaw right now. Yeah.
but um, but then we host the Galaxy on June 11th, and you can pencil in a win there because they fucking suck. So, um,
The Galaxy, Steven, did you see any of the red
mhm.
cards from that game this weekend?
I saw the best one. I saw the one on the sideline where he went over to interfere with the VAR check and got a yellow in the red.
I just
It was
don't.
beautiful.
You're already on a yellow to begin with. I don't. What are you expecting going up to a ref who's like in the process of a VAR check?
Yeah, they couldn't have expected anything good, right? I think it was a wild week of referee hijinks.
Mm,
We haven't told, we maybe we'll talk about this game a little later, but we saw the Andy Robertson getting just straight elbowed in the
just
face.
like
Like,
uppercutted.
like I don't know. It's kind of funny to me that they're doing like there's just a black comedy about everything because they're doing this investigation and they're not letting the referee ref any other games until the investigation's complete. And I'm like, what's there to investigate? This was
Like,
pretty cut and
yeah,
dried.
you saw it.
I
It's
don't
on
even
video. It's like
I don't even think that he should necessarily lose his job or anything. I think it was just like an idiotic reaction in a moment of like surprise or panic or whatever. But like,
it's like
what are we investigating?
these referees got so like hyped up about the Mitrovic incident that like they felt the presence of a player and decided to defend themselves from
Yeah,
it.
and I saw a Liverpool podcast pointed this out, but I loved Robertson being perplexed at who to complain to about a referee
That was the best
abusing him.
part.
He
Yeah.
didn't like go down or anything. He just kind of looked around and was like, he spoke Scottish, which probably means nobody understood him,
Hmm.
but he was like, he elbowed me in the jaw, and it's like, yeah, yeah,
Who
man,
do
he
I?
did.
Yeah. Where do I look at? Who do I tell this to?
But anyway, yes, the LAFC red card,
Hmm.
probably my favorite blooper from the weekend as well. Um, any other or not USMNT, any other city takes that you have
Well,
about this
like
game?
I want to talk to you about this, Steven, because they come into this in a different formation, a 5-3-2 that like
Uh-huh.
didn't use any of their wingers, which I thought was interesting. Jared Stroud has been he like leads the team in G plus right now, which is essentially like goal contributions, which some of that is inflated because the player passed directly to him on opening night, but it's interesting to run out a formation that doesn't use some of your like most dangerous players right now. However, like the reasoning that Carnell gave was that they were game planning for Seattle. Like that's the reason they come out because they're worried about the dangerousness of Shu and Jordan Morris, and it worked for 16 minutes. They can't get like too upset about it. But like, what were your thoughts seeing a brand new formation in this game?
Um, I want to be careful when I say this because I really like Bradley Carnell, um, and I think his tactical decisions have been mostly positive.
Hmm.
This one does reek a little bit of desperation to
Is
me.
this a Pep Guardiola
Um,
level overthink? Do you think?
if I don't know if there is such, I don't know if anyone else can even access that stratosphere, but it just feels like I guess it feels a little bit like you're sending your team the message of like, yeah, I don't think
Hmm.
you can hang with and play. I don't think you can control this game and play your style of soccer. I think you have to bunker down and avoid falling into Seattle's style of soccer. And I mean, you can make the argument that you're right, and Seattle's a much better team, and
Hmm.
you're just you would be thrilled to get out of there with a point. That's a very valid argument to make. Um, but I guess I think too maybe there's still a little bit of leeway in the sense that we are a brand new team and maybe he is genuinely just trying to figure out some of the things we can do
Hmm.
and some of the things that work. But um
And like maybe that's a
event
formation that they want to run throughout the year, and like you have to play it at some
yeah,
point, right? Yeah.
yeah. And I don't have a problem with that, but eventually I would like to see us have a signature formation and
Hmm.
then kind of shift around that as we need to rather than just kind of going in guns a blazing with a completely different formation every game. That's my vibe. I don't know how
Yeah.
you feel.
No, I think that tracks, and like I think that's a good segue into the Bürki quotes because that like talks about a lot of like where you're at, Steven.
Uh-huh.
Because I think Bürki kind of felt the same way. It seemed like from the comments, like not to say that he was calling out Bradley Carnell, but it's like that's a honest German man that I think can't hold his emotions.
And a very handsome German
A
man as
very
well.
handsome German man, also.
Um,
So,
yeah, yeah. So what Roman Bürki said was, he said, I would not say that it was lack of energy. It was more like we had a system that we haven't really played before. It wasn't easy for everyone just to play and not think too much. We saw that in our pressing. It wasn't the compact all the way out pressing that has made us look good so far this season. We need to work on that again to just be confident and pressing all out and put opponents under pressure so that they make a mistake and we don't. And then finally, kind of to the point that I just made, I'm not saying that I made the same point that he made, but we basically did.
yeah,
To be
you
honest,
and Bürki talked for the game, and you decided that this
that's right.
was yeah.
That's right. My close personal friend Roman. Uh, to be honest, we should not adapt too much to the opponent. We should play our game because it doesn't matter what opponent we play. When you look at the first few games, we played our style and we're successful. We are professionals. I don't want to hear that we're a team that goes out and loses to good teams. We need to step up. We need to bring the energy back, be a little more humble, and look at what we can do better every day in training. Now, I agree that I don't think this is calling out um, the manager, obviously, and Bradley Carnell, but there's certainly some frustration there. And
Hmm.
I think if you're the goalkeeper and suddenly you're intentionally playing most of the game and you're in, that would be pretty exhausting and not great. I don't know. What are your thoughts? These are pretty. I think. Let me just say for the record that as someone who covers a lot of sports teams, not I wouldn't say professionally, but for fun
Hmm.
at a fairly intense level. It's nice to have someone that says something and speaks an opinion. So that's cool. It's not doing it in an outrage kind of like loose
Yeah.
cannon way, but just kind of speaking his
Well, I
mind. What
think
are your
like
thoughts?
yeah, I think Berkey's kind of like earned that level of like he's been there and done that to the point where he can
Mm-hmm.
say stuff like this and not like necessarily get backlash upon him because like I think he's right to a sense, right? And like obviously Cardinal has a lot of trust in him, and I think him and Cardinal have like good relationship. So it's not like this is just going to be something that blows up. And like at practice today, it seemed like everyone had high energy, and like it doesn't seem like there's a rift in the team necessarily. But like yeah, I think it's a guy who is highly competitive, who has a high standard for himself and for the team in front of him that is just like frustrated by seeing this game play out the way it did.
Yeah, and I think I want to say he's justified. I don't know. I don't know that a different formation would have changed the result. Maybe we would have won. Maybe we would have lost 10-0.
Yeah,
I don't
but if you
know, but
lose 3-0 playing in your 4-4-2 or whatever, like pressing hard, like does is that a little bit easier to swallow than this was?
yeah, exactly. Maybe that's the case. And these are the lessons that he's going to have to, that Carnell's going to have to learn, the team's going to have to learn. Um, so, you know, I think it's cool. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and like
I
ultimately,
think
like
it's,
yeah, you're gonna make mistakes, and we've talked about before how like Carnell has been so good in his adjustments before this, so it's like whatever, it happens.
yeah, exactly. So, moving on to the next game, FC Cincinnati Supporter Shield leaders. Um, what's your vibe check? How are you feeling about this one? Worried, nervous, upset?
A little nervous, yeah. Pat Noonan, of course, St. Louis's own, coming home. Like
Coming
I feel
home,
like that's tough.
coming home.
I will say
Definitely.
that they got a little bit bailed out, and that Brenner and Lucio Costa were held out of practice today, so I think they might be a little bit like banged up heading into the weekend. Which, if they are held out, like that helps St. Louis a lot. I don't know if that is what ends up happening, but uh, outside of that, like Cincinnati have been very good, very defensively sound. They did draw 3-3 with Chicago, so like maybe there's some room to open things up on them. But every other game they've won 1-0, and looking at that, like I think you could see another frustrating game potentially. But like City need to score a goal also. Like they need to run at this game. They need to open it up, and they haven't scored in 2 games. And I think that's been something that once they get that goal again, it's going to be like very relieving to see.
Yeah. I think that'll be a huge weight off their shoulders. I am going to go out on a limb and say that
Okay.
I think they get a result in this one. I think they find a way to at least draw and maybe get the win here. I think their style will challenge Cincinnati. Um, I think that they will be hungry and very, very, I don't want to say frustrated, but motivated, I guess,
I
to
think yeah, I think I
defend
have that
home turf.
same.
And go ahead.
No, I think I have that same feeling. Like I think that if they play like they did versus in that 5 game winning streak, if they play like that where the press is that high octane, like I think that gives Cincinnati some issues. I don't think that they have center backs that are necessarily great handling the ball. Like I could see that being an issue. Outside, like I'm definitely scared of their attack, and I'm definitely scared of their midfield. But like especially Brenner can just tear you apart in a moment's notice. But I think this is a game where like Edouard Lewin could step out of the challenge as well, especially with all the accolades that Brenner gets. Like I think Lewin has that kind of mentality of like I want to be the best player in this match too. Yeah, I think I have a similar outlook that you do. I could see this going our way.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to this one a lot. It's at a reasonable time on the East Coast, which is a nice change of pace lately.
How did you do with that Seattle game? That was what like midnight
Oh
your time.
God, yeah. I mean, they're starting at 10:30. It's brutal. I'm a late night person, but that's just a
Ban
hard time.
West Coast trips, as I always
It's
say.
just a hard time to start something.
Yeah,
Like that. It's one thing if the game's still going at 10:30, but you're doing the opening kickoff at 10:37, and you're just like, what?
I was having issues staying awake before the
Uh
game started, and I was like, "Oh man, this is gonna be rough." And then like having to wait for the press conference, and I was just on fumes.
yeah. Well, you are an intrepid reporter, Justin,
Thank you,
and we
Stephen.
appreciate your
I'm glad
commitment.
somebody's noticing my commitment to the cause.
Um, Let us move to our favorite non-domestic league, the Premier League. I think we can agree on that, right?
Yeah, we can
Um,
agree.
and talk about the fact that the Arsenal, the Arsenal Liverpool game was first and foremost just a phenomenal game.
Yeah,
Um,
this was
and
the best game of the year, I think, from a Premier
yeah,
League standpoint.
definitely up there. And secondly, um, how do I phrase this delicately? I have never been so concerned about a team that has a 6-game lead, a 6-point lead on the
Oh yeah.
table with 8 games left to play. It doesn't. Listen, Jeff, Gift Jeff, if you're listening, this is not. I want Arsenal to win it at this point. I don't even. This is not a comment against you or anything else.
I would rather Arsenal than Man City at this point. Yes.
Doesn't Man City just have that kind of Thanos?
Oh, yeah.
I am inevitable
Man City
feeling with them
are
right now.
going to win the league. I would like to go out on record and say that right now.
I mean, and to make matters worse, they have a game in hand. So the 6-point lead is really a 3-point lead. And there's still an Arsenal Man City game that is to be played. I think at Arsenal. So I guess they've got that going for them. But I don't think that Man City can be stopped. I don't think they'll drop points the rest of the season. I think Erling Haaland has fully stopped trying to blend in with the human beings.
Oh yeah, he is. Yeah, he has given up all false pretenses that he is just a normal human.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean it's upsetting because Arsenal has played such a good season. They really deserve to be champions, and I don't think they're going to get to be, and that really sucks. I genuinely
allowing
feel bad about it.
Going up 2-0 and allowing Firmino to score that goal in the 87th minute, that sealed the title. That sealed their fate, I think.
It's so upsetting to say that about a team who, again, still has a 6-point lead. But choking away that game.
Mm-hmm.
After the 2 goals, I mean, I went to, it was Easter Sunday, obviously. Happy Easter, everyone. It was Easter Sunday here. I went to a place, I found out there's a place really close to me that's a Liverpool supporters bar, so went there. They were open.
That's breaking news. I didn't know this, Stephen. Breaking news on the podcast. Stephen has found a Liverpool supporters bar.
So they had a lovely Irish barkeep, and he poured me a beer right after church on Easter Sunday. It was great. My German friend met me there. They didn't have food, so we were talking about possibly, going to get food at halftime. And by halftime, we were so despondent that we didn't even care about coming back and finding the game. And then, the whole second half played out the way it did. I just don't think Arsenal can justify letting that game slip away. That's the one moment like you said, that's the moment you look back on and think maybe this is where they lost the title.
That's the Steven Gerrard slipping moment right there.
Yeah. They would be, if they'd won that game right now, they'd be 8 points clear instead of 6, and they would still be able to control their fate, even if Manchester City wins the game in hand and the head-to-head. Now it's those 6 points can determine pretty much everything. And let me look at goal differential real quick. The Man City has the 48-43 lead on goal differential, so they've got the tiebreaker if it comes to that.
Man City also has a much easier schedule too. They're playing like pretty much lowly teams outside of Arsenal, which
Leicester, is like Arsenal in a couple weeks, then Fulham, West Ham, Leeds, Everton, Chelsea, which is not much less lowlier than the rest of those teams, and Brentford. Whereas Arsenal have, let me pull it up if it will let me. Hold on.
No, they have Newcastle in there at some point.
Southampton, Man City, Chelsea, Newcastle, Brighton, Nottingham Forest, and Wolves.
That Brighton game is tough too. Like Brighton's playing well.
I think they both have Brighton, but yes.
Oh, they do, don't they? Yeah, they do.
But I mean that's still a. Oh wait, the Brighton game is postponed. Well, I guess that will be rescheduled.
What's going on at Premier League?
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a fun race. I think very interesting to see who this relegation race is going to, because I think everyone from Crystal Palace on down is believably in the relegation zone. Southampton has pretty much sealed their fate. but Leicester City and Nottingham could claw out. Everton, Leeds are in serious danger. Bournemouth, West Ham, Wolves, and Crystal Palace are all kind of in the danger zone. Burnley has already been promoted. They've sealed the promotion next season. And before you roll your eyes, I have it on the authority of the what's the name? Total Soccer Show. That
Yeah.
this is a very different, very interesting.
This is a Vincent Kompany Burnley and not a Sean Dyche Burnley, which is very different. It's a very big distinction to make.
So very cool to see them coming back. I kind of like Burnley for whatever reason. I don't know why, but
I also like I like Vincent Kompany's journey too, because he was like a player manager in Belgium, like at Anderlecht, I believe, and he's kind of like working his way through the ranks. So like I think that's really interesting.
Wasn't especially well received in that job. I think,
yeah, definitely not.
So, what are your thoughts on the relegation race? Who's getting out of this thing?
Oh man, I think it's a shame that Everton look like they've kind of figured things out recently. I thought that would be a good story if Everton got relegated, but luckily for Garrett, I think that they're safe. I think that like looking at form, like I think it probably ends this way. Leicester, I don't see clawing out. Nottingham have had like such a bad run of form of late. Like I think it ends like this. Obviously, Everton could throw it all away at a moment's notice. I do not feel confident in that decision, but
yeah,
if I'm looking at how teams are playing right now, like I think that the teams above them have scraped together enough results to stay up.
Agreed. I think you're right. Let's talk Champions League real quick, and specifically, will anyone but Real Madrid win the Champions League?
No, this is
yes or no.
This is definitely one of those years that like you talk about. Okay, Bayern could win it, Manchester City could win it, and then like Madrid just ends up winning like 6-1 in the final or something. Yeah. I think like City are probably, as much as it hurts to say that, probably the best chance to knock them off, especially with how well.
Oh, definitely, but they are still Pep Guardiola.
They are still Pep Guardiola overthinking away from just completely. And I guess that would be in the semi too, right? So they're on the same side of the bracket.
Yeah,
so
I think so. Madrid handled Frank Lampard's Chelsea 2-0 in the first leg. There's no chance Chelsea is going to mount a comeback there. Napoli and Milan looks like an interesting contest. That's the closest one, 1-0 after leg one. Inter and Benfica, 2-0 victory for Inter in the first game. And then Man City really putting a pounding on Bayern Munich, who can't quite seem to figure out if they're good or not right now. I mean, obviously they're Bayern Munich, they're very good, but like they have had a weird week.
If we could stop on Bayern for a moment, like I don't understand them firing Nagelsmann. Like, obviously, I think it's something behind the scenes and not like on the field issues, obviously. But like, it's on his
longboard to practice.
You ride a motorcycle, Steven. Come on.
What bothers me about it is like they kind of hinted that basically the reason they fired Nagelsmann is that he's weird, and then they hired Thomas Tuchel, who's weird. Like, you know, like
it's not any more normal than Nagelsmann is. Like maybe he's a machine, so he doesn't ride a motorcycle to practice, but Tuchel, I think, doesn't have human emotions.
But that's right. But anyway, I mean, I think it's a very interesting call. They had they fired Nagelsmann, they hired Tuchel, they beat Dortmund 4-2 to reestablish themselves at the top of the Bundesliga title race. But then they lost to SC Freiburg in the Deutsche Pokal, making it the first time in a long time that neither Dortmund or Bayern are in the semifinals of that prestigious competition. And then they barely scraped by Freiburg in the league a few days later, 1-0 victory. And now they've got murdered by Man City. They've got Hoffenheim up next. You would expect them to win out in the league and at least hold off Dortmund's challenge, but they've still got an RB Leipzig game on the penultimate day of the season. And it's definitely interesting. It's going to be a weird race to watch. I guess Thomas Tuchel has nothing to lose really, because if he wins the title race, he can say, "Look, I turned the team around," and if he loses it, he can say, "Look, I came in with 8 weeks left. What was I supposed to do?" So I don't know. Definitely agree with you though. The vibes there are very strange right
It's
now.
yeah, I don't know how to read it because like I could have seen them firing Tuchel like earlier in the season when they were down in the table, like things weren't going well, but they had like turned it around and then like made the decision to I don't know. Like I guess it's they made the decision before the Dortmund game, so it's like you see that as a must win. Unfortunately, Dortmund just choking every title chance they've ever seen outside of like one time a decade ago. It's very upsetting, Steven. You're learning this now as a new Dortmund fan that it's hard to watch that team in a title race.
Yeah, it is. But I watched for one game, so hard to be too upset. Um, in any case, I don't know. I think soccer's really fun right now. It's going to be a fun end to the season.
Yeah,
You've got the Women's World Cup this summer. Very exciting time to be a soccer fan.
it
So, any
really is.
final thoughts, Justin, that you want to share before we move on? Any Becky Saurbrunn odes that you would like to put out there, or
Well,
any other?
so that's a thank you, Steven, for that segue. I wrote
Yeah,
about Becky Saurbrunn in STL Mag. It's on my Twitter. I retweeted it from Soccer Talk Lad's account. I used that, so hopefully you're not too mad, Steven. But yeah, it was just wonderful talking to her. Obviously, this was a homecoming for her, like we talked about earlier. It's like they kind of set this up as a situation to like celebrate her while she's still in the team because this is probably her last World Cup. And I don't know how much longer she's going to be in the national team. So it was nice to have that moment at City Park to like actually have a full soccer stadium to celebrate her in. And like, I just had a lot of good vibes coming off that game that we could actually like celebrate one of our own in their time. And Becky is one of, I almost wanted to say most celebrated, but like definitely one of the most celebrated U.S. soccer players ever, and I would say like one of the most influential off the field as well for the work that she did with the CBA and everything else, like just in the growth of women's soccer in this country. So it was a good feeling to have that moment.
nice. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's really cool to see the homecoming, and I just thought the reception they all got at the airport and everything else has just made it really special and
Yeah.
cool to see. So very exciting. I'm looking forward to this game Saturday. I know everyone listening will be as well. If you've listened this long, we appreciate you. You are a golden child. May your
Very much.
bruns always be sour and your sons always be swans. And
Next time you
I don't
see
have anything
us,
else.
Ian, I think, is on his way to catching the One Piece. So
We'll
maybe
see.
we'll,
Yeah,
we'll talk about that next time.
perhaps we'll find out. We'll hear all about Ian's stories on the way on his return journey. But until then, we will talk to everyone very soon. Have a wonderful weekend. Let's go, City, and good night.
Adios.